Hey guys, today I have a $300 computer build for you. This one's a little special than the last one. This one has two components to it where you could pick from either a AMD and an Intel build from it. Both of these will perform pretty darn comparable to each other. They'll be very, very good for gaming. You might be able to get away with a little video editing like I have been. For one of the builds is really close to what my computer currently is, but mine's overclocked of it, and we'll get to that towards the end. First, let's kick it off with the graphics card. Today I have chosen the PowerColor Radeon R7 250X 1GB of video RAM edition. This is a pretty darn good graphics card. It's comparable to maybe a 650 Ti, which is in my build, but I would say it's a little weaker than that, but it doesn't matter. This thing should get you some pretty darn good settings. Like for the video that you're watching right now, I used the 650 Ti as I said before, and I did my synthetic thing, quotation marks over it, where I simulated what this computer should be able to do, and I was able to play, let's say, Crysis 2, almost all max settings at 768p, which I'm currently using, and I just had to lower down the shaders due to not enough video RAM, and the game ran smoothly from anywhere from 60 solid all the way down to the very high 40s. So this is a pretty darn good video card. You should get pretty comparable settings to that, but expect nothing super amazing out of this build. It's only $300. Just keep that in mind while you're watching this entire video. Enough said of the graphics card. Let's move on to the RAM. For the RAM, I've chosen the ADATA XPA or XPG version 1 4GB RAM stick. Although 4 gigs is starting to show its age in today's market where you can't even play Battlefield 4 on it without it shuddering due to memory leaks, you could still get away with games like Witcher 3 running on 4 gigs of RAM and even GTA 5. So it's more of an upgrade path where you have one 4 gig stick in, and when you get maybe 20-30 bucks more, you could drop another 4 gig stick in there and have 8 gigs of RAM. Those are the limitations of only the $300 build that we have here. We're only going to stick with 4 gigs. Now for the storage, I have chosen the Seagate Barracuda 1TB hard drive. This hard drive is pretty common in most builds for like the $300 to maybe $600 range and below. It's a pretty darn good big mass storage which will hold your operating system, your music, your videos, your video games. And it only comes in at $48. It's a pretty darn good hard drive if you ask me. Now for the case, I picked the Zalman Z5 ATX mid-tower case. For $23, it's a pretty darn good deal. I paid $23 for my case, and it comes nowhere near as nice looking as this case. Mine looks like a piece of crap, like I said before. But I digress. This case is pretty darn good. Will hold everything you need in it, and you might even be able to get away with an upgrade in the future of this case. For the power supply, I picked the EVGA 500 watt 80 plus certified ATX power supply. As the title says, it's a 500 watt power supply. It's 80 plus certified, and it's only $25. Pretty darn good deal, as this thing should be able to power both builds smoothly with no hitches in it. For both builds, like the Intel one only uses 232 watts of power, and the AMD one will only use 274 watts of power. Now it's the fun time. Let's talk about the CPUs. For the Intel build, I picked the G3258 dual-core processor. This dual-core processor you'll be able to overclock on to some insane levels. Well, to tell you the truth, I'm using this processor, and on the stock cooler, I got up to 4.3 gigahertz, and it only tops out at 75 to maybe 78 degrees under 100% load over a long period of time. I'm able to play most video games out right now on my computer with no problems, and I'm getting about the same performance as what an i7 would get in some games that don't need 4 cores. But if you really need those 4 cores, for the AMD build, I picked the Athlon X4 860K. This little processor is clocked at 3.7 GHz. Although it's higher than the Pentium, it does slouch a little bit in some games, but if you need that 4 cores for games like Far Cry 4 and Dragon Age Inquisition, which have a little bit of a lockout on dual cores, you should buy this one if you don't want to get involved with mods or hacking it to get the game to work. Now let's move back to the Intel side. The Intel motherboard I've decided, well, not Intel motherboard, but the motherboard I've decided for the Intel side of this build is the ASRock H81M DGS R2.0 Micro ATX motherboard. This motherboard has 2 RAM DIMMs for up to, I think, 16 gigs of RAM, but the highest you'll be able to get out of this is maybe 8 if you drop in another stick. And it has your assortment of PCI slots for where you're going to stick one of the graphics, well, the graphics card into, because I don't think this motherboard supports SLI or Crossfire. Now, let's push all that aside, and here's the most important thing I need to warn you guys about with this motherboard. It's based on the H81 chipset, and the H81 chipset is known to have tons of compatibility issues with the Haswell refresh CPUs, which the G3258 is one. And one thing though I need to tell you is this thing should run smooth, no problem when you're booting it up, but you cannot overclock. The multipliers will be locked until you go in and flash the BIOS to the new one or the updated one. Now that that's said, let's move to the AMD part of the build. For the motherboard, I chose the MSI A68HM E3233 Micro ATX FM2 Plus motherboard. This motherboard should house your Athlon X4 8600K smooth. Like, just drop it in, it won't do anything. It'll be sitting right there as happy as ever. It should support the same. It should be pretty much like the exact same as the H81 motherboard I was just talking about. Same everything. No crossfire support, no SLI support. Supports up to 16 gigs of RAM. It's pretty much the exact same motherboard, but like the AMD's version of it. Well, not version, their sides, low-end ones. But this one's by MSI, and it has. I think there's overclock genie with this BIOS, which is pretty cool for the people out there who don't want to overclock and go in there and switch to multipliers. You just click one little button, and it's already overclocked for you. It's just ready to go. Now, this build's pretty much wrapping up. Let's talk about the peripherals, which I usually do with all my builds that I'm going to be talking about. A lot of people, I go on YouTube and I look for videos, and about 99.9% of all builds never talk about a keyboard and mouse. One little disclaimer is this keyboard and this mouse are not really the best ones if you decide to do like hardcore Counter-Strike or Counter-Strike-ing with. It's pretty cheap. They both will just work. Only adds $11 onto the build. If you don't want the keyboard and mouse, don't buy them. You might have a keyboard and a mouse just sitting around from an old computer that you have that you're going to upgrade to this one with to try out some gaming. But let's move to the keyboard. The keyboard's going to be an Logitech K120 wired standard keyboard. You know, a standard keyboard, nothing else to say. And then the mouse, which I recommended in the last one, is just a Kingston one. Just a standard Kingston wired mouse. $5.50, just gets the basic needs done. And that concludes pretty much the entire build. If you guys liked it, please favorite, like, subscribe. If you think that you could build a better build, please drop a comment right below it, reply to mine, which I'll get on my email, and I'll come in. You might have found a better deal, might have a better component to swap out one of them in here that I might switch the build with. And that concludes it. Now the video's over, I just need to tell you about my schedule, what I'm going to be doing for uploads. Every single week I should upload on Saturday or Sunday. If worst comes to worst and there's some complications, Monday for sure. But that will be the upload schedule for my channel. And break's coming along, so I might be able to do some videos on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or sometime in between. So yeah, enjoy your day.